Hey everyone, Sycra here. And today I'm doing a photo study because I haven't done one of those in a while. And I figured I'll record it and, walk you through what I'm doing. So the first thing I did was I just knocked down the value of the background because I felt it was distracting. And more than that, I like to start in black and white, or at least, sometimes I do. Sometimes I go straight to color. But for this one, I wanted to start in black and white. And when you judge values, they're all dependent on the values that are already there. Like how bright something looks depends on the values around it. And for instance, her hair is pretty bright, but the background was a bit brighter, so then her hair looks less bright. So by making the values darker in the background, even if it's sloppy, like I just threw in some random stuff, it'll still be fine. And then the next thing I did was I did a basic sketch, but you might have noticed it was super small, like very zoomed out. And even right now, the reference image, it's quite small. And this is on purpose because it's so small that I don't get to focus on details at all. Like I'm not going to get lost on details because I can't even see those details. And so what you want to do when you draw an image is start with the big picture. And ironically, the big picture is, you get that from having the picture very small. You get to see the entire image and the entire composition and the big forms and the big placement of things. And then by zooming in as I go, I'm able to see more detail, and then I'm able to paint that detail. So I'm not seeing anything that I don't need to see. Because, if I zoomed in, often what happens is you'll look at an image and you might see something like a change in the hair or something. Like it'll shift planes, or maybe there's a relationship with the nose and it has like an angle to it or something. And you'll look at that and you'll think, oh, that's, I see that. And so you'll put that in and you'll exaggerate it. And that's because your brain is geared to see minute little changes. But from far, it's really nothing. There's not that much going on. And it's the same when we look at people, especially. You'll easily be able to see if something's like, if their eye is a little too high or a little too low, or one of their arms is longer than the other. You'll pick up on that. But usually it's a very, very tiny change in things. It's not huge. So again, it's just one more reason to start off really small, and then when you want to add detail, then you zoom in. And when you add detail is pretty much when you've painted everything as far as you can take it with the image at that size. When it's like, I don't know what else to add. I can't see any more details. I would need to see more detail to be able to paint more. That's when you zoom in. And here again, I zoomed in. When it comes to the brush right now, I'm using a brush by DeHarm. It's one of his painting brushes. And I think I have a link to his brushes on Sycra.net. If you go to www.sycra.net and you go to the resources section, I have a bunch of brushes and books and a bunch of other stuff on that, in that area. So I'm using his brush, and what I'm trying to do as much as possible, and sometimes I'm failing at it and sometimes I'm succeeding, is I'm trying to get things down with as few brush strokes as possible. I'm not always, as I said, I'm not always succeeding in that. But that's what I'm practicing on, is to not make a bunch of little brush strokes, but make the brush as big as it can be to make the stroke that I need to make. And it makes things difficult in terms of getting some details that you might want, but at the same time, I think it makes the image look a lot better, and once you get used to it, at least for me anyway, I'm hoping once I get used to it, it'll just be better. Because even now, I think my brush is too big. I mean, too small. Yeah, my brush is too small and it needs to be bigger. But yeah, because of that, I can't get much detail into the face. And so the face stays pretty undetailed for a while. And now what I'm doing is I'm adding some pattern on the dress. But the way I'm doing it is I'm just using the exact same brush that I've been using the whole time and just clicking it. And it's a textured brush. So when you just tap it, it has a texture. But when you drag it like a brush stroke, then that texture is more smooth and you can do more with it. So why am I starting in black and white? Well, it's just easier to tell values. And values are really the important thing when it comes to painting. That's usually what people get wrong. Either it's a drawing or it's the values. And so I want to get my values right. And in terms of translating it from black and white to color, it seems there's a lot of people with this issue. I know I had this problem when I first started, so I'm going to walk you through how I do that later. But for now, yeah, I start with black and white, and it's less for me to worry about. So when I do get to worrying about color, at least I don't have to worry about value. Now, there's a bunch of mistakes that I can see as I look at this. Probably the biggest is her arm to the distance between her arm and her body. I made it way too close. And I think I did that by giving her too much of a butt, I think. So here I'm trying to paint in the features. But as I said, because I'm using like big brushes, it's very hard to do any detail. And I'm trying not to zoom in and go ahead and paint in all those little details. And it takes a bit of discipline, but I think it's, as I said, I think it's good. I think it's a good practice to do this. The reason is it forces you to think of planes and bigger shapes. And when you're doing that, it's harder to be just a photocopier, because one of the problems with photo studies is often you end up in this just replicating one for one what you see, and you might not learn much if you do that. So I think it's better actually to change your image in some way. I do think it's a good exercise to be able to replicate something one for one, but even if you, through the technique, like using a bigger brush, means you're going to be thinking a lot more than just copying, like, oh, this color is like dark, so I'm going to paint dark here. And then beside that, there's this other thing. I don't know. I struggled a lot with the torso, getting the values right. And I don't know if it shows where I'm struggling or not, but as I said, it's been quite a while since I've done anything like this. I think I'm doing more realistic stuff these days, and doesn't mean I'm going to give up doing my stylized stuff. It's just, I think it's good to do both, because I don't know, as I progress, it seems certain aspects of me want to do different things, and I'm just letting them do that. With the staff thing she's holding, I changed it up quite a bit because I didn't really like the one in the reference, and I'm guessing this is a character, but I don't know who it is, so I just made the staff whatever. Feel free to write in the comments what this character is. I got this, I just searched Google for royalty-free images, but I'll post a link to this is a cosplayer. I'm not sure exactly her name. So I'm moving into color now, and the first thing I did was I made a new new layer, and I set it to color, and I filled it with like this yellowy brownish tan color that's sort of like the color of her skin. And then I made a new layer above that, and I set that to color as well. And this is what I'm doing here, is I'm just changing it. So there is that underneath tan tone, and I'm letting that shine through in places. And I think that's from painting, like traditionally, that's how I would do it. I let things shine through some of the background so the colors seem more harmonized. So I got a bit more blue in the background, and I'm pushing it a bit more to yellow in the hair and things. And then what I did is I've made a new layer and I've set it to overlay, and now I've switched my brush to a large soft brush, and I'm using this to add more value changes that aren't there before and some color variation, because when you're only looking at something in black and white, sometimes you miss some of the value shifts that are there, and they're easier to see in color. But for me, they're easier to see once the values are all correct. And now what I'm doing is, this is pretty much just from imagination at this point. I'm starting to not look at the reference as much and just put things in where I feel like I want to add something. So like with the lips, they're no longer the same lips, and the eyes, I'm sort of changing them a bit. But I feel like it's an exercise as well to change things in your reference. And that lets you practice how to make something look right. You know, like, does it still look right? Can I still handle this? But I'm still trying to keep it sort of like the model. I don't want to go completely far away from that, but yeah, I did want some variation, something a bit different. So here I'm just adding in some bigger brush strokes. Again, making things harmonized, like with the background. The hands were tricky to do because of that big brush thing, and having to shrink the brush. And this brush that I'm using doesn't really work well in a smaller scale, but again, trying my best and trying to think about anatomy and structure and stuff like that. Again, when I look at it, all I see are all the flaws now, so it's pretty difficult for me to look at this and not see just a huge failure, but I have to get over that. I have to get over that urge to just want to beat myself up over everything or for everything, and just whatever. It's a study. It's a study, and I think if I think of it that way, I'm more likely to do more instead of just get depressed. And here I'm just adding in some angles and straights and stuff. Not that they really exist, just to make it more, I don't know, simplistic, because I like that. I like when things are more basic in terms of their shape. And here I'm just screwing around with a dodge layer, color dodge layer, and making things glow just because it's, it's digital, so you can do that. So I hope this helped, and thanks for watching.